Good morning. We are in Hemshech Tzadik Daled, 5694, page 86. So let's sum up where we're at and we'll continue on. We are discussing the nature of the kav, which is going to be understood as the interface in the third interpretation of the Ayin Beis, the channel in between the creator and the creation, Yesh Amiti, Yesh Anivra. So the kav creates Milo Mata, structure, hierarchy. It does so being that it followed the Tzimtzum. So we discussed at length in the last few classes was what really creates fundamentally hischalkus, ribur in hischalkus, a multitude and diversity from oneness. So we cited the Pardes, and as I explained yesterday, this was all from Ayin Beis in the pages 938 and on, 938 through 940. He negates and says the Pardes answer is not sufficient because that only works with Eris and Kalim, Lamata. So the ultimate answer is that there's no question in the first place, because Atzmus is not definable. He doesn't say it in these words, but he's not definable by any form of definition, not by bli gvul and not by gvul, not by achdus and not by ribui. And therefore he's machriach, meaning the power of Atzmus compels everything, including the ability to create the ribui and ischalkus. And he explained at length what Atzmus is. Atzmus is beyond both, is neither of the both of them included. In Giluyim, you have the beginnings of structure. I shouldn't say the word structure, that's not a good expression. Structure begins after the Tzimtzum. In Giluyim, you can say, that's not Atzmus, you can say there's Gvul, there's Bli Gvul. But in Atzmus, it's Yecholte Lahoyer, Yecholte Shalei Lahoyer. It's Yechelus, his capacity, which is an equalizer. Whereas in Giluyim, you already begin to have the element of manifestation. So does it manifest as Bli Gvul? Does it manifest as Gvul? And so we have the two tracks that God creates. One is Yecholte, his ability to radiate is one force. His ability to not radiate becomes a second force. In Atzmus, it's all one. In Giluyim, meaning a manifestation, in other words, in Mitzias Nimtza, in existential terms, and when we call something that exists, it exists either this or exists that. Then he takes it back, so now that we know this, so we know in the root of roots, the power to create both is Atzmus. To create, in other words, both Bli Gvul and Gvul, or both the unity and the diversity. However, now we're going to go through the process, how is it activated? Because remember, even though it's in the Koyach HaAtzmus, you still need to know how is it actually activated in the process of step by step that we can relate to. So what happens is now that we have now in Giluyim, we're talking about Er Lifnei Tzimtzum, so we have both powers, the two kavim, but Lifnei Tzimtzum, what dominates, more than dominates, the all-encompassing consciousness is Bli Gvul. The Kedem Hatzeh is galus b'bchinas ha-Bli Gvul shebe'ein sof. So I'm just going to continue from there, even though we learned it yesterday. Let's just continue from there. Hainu shagili hazeh hoye be'izgabrus. That was what was. The word Hizgabrus can mean dominant. Hizgabrus means the overpowering element. Why does he say Hizgabrus? Why not saying it's only the only thing that exists is Elikus Bipshitus, meaning divine consciousness and nothing else? Because remember, we learned that even Lifnei Tzimtzum, there are in the guide divine consciousness stages, kavyachol, so to speak, which means there's already the preparation for Eir HaGvul. In the Eir Ein Sof, we learned there's Etzem Eir, there's Ispashtus Eir, the core energy, the extension. In the extension, we learned there's the Ratzon, the 3 levels in desire, which break down even further, to the point that you're even envisioning, God is envisioning existence to the point He allocates resources, Shir Asmei B'Koyach. So to say that it's that the only thing that exists is Eid Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, completely divine, nothing, there's no elements, that's not correct either. The elements are all as if it's Eid HaKol B'Atzmusei, because all that matters there is what Atzmus is the dominant, all that matters is Atzmus's consciousness, divine consciousness. But what dominates, the consciousness dominates there is Bli Gvul. And based on Lifnei Tzimtzum, even though God allocated and prepared and envisioned, it's not yet a structure, it's not a building. It's like the teacher preparing within himself to prepare to relate to another, but he's not yet relating to the other. So therefore, Lifnei Tzimtzum, what's Beis Gabrus? Bli Gvul. What changes that? How suddenly, as we spoke yesterday, from a complete Ein Eid Mulvade, I'm using just the words in the pasuk. It's even deeper than Eid Mulvade, because Ein Eid Mulvade is said in the pasuk in Veschanon after creation. That though there's a creation, v'yadaita Ayin Beis, or there it says Ein Eid. In the pasuk Ata Reis L'das Ki Hashem Elokim Ein Eid Mulvade. But that hergish, that feeling, that sense of only and solely and exclusively divine awareness, what shifts? That allows now the presence of another. And that's the tzimtzum. Vayidei ha-tzimtzum, nizgala koyach ha-gvul shebe-ein sof. Nizgala, it doesn't say nishave, because the koyach ha-gvul is a koyach of godly, it's a godly power. In Atzmus, it's called yecholte, yechelis. In Oir, in the Giluyim, before the tzimtzum, it's called koyach ha-gvul, or Eir ha-gvul. Just like there's Eir ha-bli gvul. So this Koyach HaGvul is there, but it cannot be revealed because without the Tzimtzum, what's all pervasive and completely indivisible is divine infinity. Not infinity as opposed that God doesn't have the power. We know, we just learned that He has the power of both. But what's dominant, and maybe that's why He said on the second, third line of the page, that with Bli Gvul, with Tefus, Es HaAtzmus Yeser, because remember, Bli Gvul by definition also includes Gvul in a way. Even though He said in the Kavim, Gvul and Bli Gvul are not makabel from one another, but in a sense, the Bli Gvul of Atzmus is everything, including the Gvul that's within it, because of Atzmus. So Bli Gvul on its own and Gvul are 2 different tracks. But once it's coming from Atzmus, Bli Gvul, so to speak, precedes Gvul. Eir ha-Bli Gvul, and then God says, I want an Eir ha-Gvul within the Bli Gvul. Like we learn, Shir Atzmei B'Koyach, within the infinite possibilities, I'm choosing one, because He wants them to interact. It's not a contradiction to the fact that He said that they're not receiving from one another. That's on their own. But when you're talking about Atzmus in creating them, they are going to interact with each other. So point being is before Tzimtzum, Bli Gvul dominates. Tzimtzum allows the Koyach HaGvul to emerge, to be revealed. So an example of the artist can create infinite different types of art. He has the capacity, different types of art. Then there's a choice he makes that I'm going to create one piece of art. It's still in a state that one piece is still part of all the infinite possibilities. Then he needs a tzimtzum. We has to put aside, I'm going to learn in a moment, both elements of the tzimtzum. But what does he want the tzimtzum? Because he wants this one piece of art should be the dominant feature. He doesn't want to be what's the word I want to use? He doesn't want to be not overwhelmed. He doesn't want all the possibilities to outshine and overshadow. That's the word I was using. The gvul. So if you have infinite possibilities, and one of them is what you chose to do now, you have to make sure that this one emerges. If not, it'll be completely overshadowed and overwhelmed by all the possibilities. Like think of, there's an ocean of water that covers everything underneath it. If you want to take out one item, you have to move the ocean aside to focus on that. So therefore the tzimtzum, one of the things it does, this is going to be the second function, is the revealing of the Koyach HaGvul that's there embedded. It's within the Eir Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, as we learned earlier about all the levels and stages, but it's not revealed. So what does the Tzimtzum do? Nizgal l'Koyach HaGvul Shebei Ein Sof. L'chein, hine adei Tzimtzum bo Eir b'bchinas Ischalkus. And that's why, through the Tzimtzum, the Eir now comes in a state of diversity and distinction. The Koyach HaIschalkus is there before, Atzmus for sure, the Yechelis for it, and even in Eir Ein Sof, the infinite Tzimtzum is also, he has the capacity, the Koyach, but it's all part of one big divine consciousness, an Eined Mulvade Elikus Bepshitas consciousness. So in order for that specific Ischalkus distinction to actually emerge, the Tzimtzum causes the Bligvul to recede or to be concealed, is a better way to put it. And this Koyach HaGvul comes into emerge, like we said before, Koyach HaGvul relates to Ischalkus. Remember, Koyach HaGvul is Ribu Ischalkus, Koyach HaBligvul is Achdus. I'm sorry, I skipped a line. I wrote, the no, I didn't skip, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. So now this Koyach HaGvul, this power of the finite, emerges, revealed. So in effect, the power to create Ischalkus is because Atzmus can create anything, as we learned. But in the actual process of doing so, it is the Tzimtzum that causes the Bligvul to be concealed and the Koyach HaGvul to be revealed. As he says in the next line, that Tzimtzum obeys in Yonim. The Tzimtzum is in two functions. The Tzimtzum is in two. It's hard to translate into English. That Tzimtzum hu obeys in Yonim. The Tzimtzum manifests in two manners, in two aspects to it. Echad, silika Eir Ein Sof HaBligvul, which I just elaborated upon. The removal, the concealment of the infinite. Now this doesn't mean it disappears. It means it does not affect the reality of whatever's going to happen in the Chol L'Mokum Panim, in the space that the Tzimtzum creates. So it doesn't mean it disappears, God forbid. It means it's not impacting this area now. This area where existence is going to emerge. So that's the first function, or the first element, aspect of the Tzimtzum. Ayin Beis, Tzimtzum v'Helam ha'Esh shebo b'midah v'gvul. The Tzimtzum, the contracting and the limiting of the light, the Sheba that comes b'midah v'gvul. As I said, you could say either it means that since it conceals even the midah v'gvul as it's in its power and potential before the Tzimtzum, or it's actually affecting this Eir HaGvul, that it should come into a more measured state. I just want to see how he says it in Ayin Beis, the language. Just give me a moment. Taf Taf Kuf Lamed Daled. I'm looking on page 934 if you're interested. The two Inyanim and the Tzimtzum. Mam is this what language? Tzimtzum v'Helam ha'Esh sheba b'midah v'gvul. So on page 11, 938, he explains what he means exactly. That the way the Eir HaGvul was before the Tzimtzum, it was not Nikar Adayin. It wasn't obvious yet. So the Tzimtzum causes that it should become effective. And then he says, that's where I got it from. Then he says, in addition to that, the Tzimtzum causes his Chalkus Milo Mato. Yeah. Okay. Point being, as I said, think of again, the artist, all the infinite possibilities are there. Even if he's envisioning one, it's still all part of one big infinite whole. So the Tzimtzum puts aside or quiets down the infinite possibilities. One effect. Second element of the Tzimtzum, second aspect, is that it allows the midah v'gvul to emerge and to start going through its stages which of course is going to be implemented by the kav. Because remember, the tzimtzum does not create anything. The tzimtzum allows for the space. And now we learn the two aspects that the tzimtzum allows for, and this again is elaborated upon, and it's taken, this is very short, brief here, summarized from page 934 in Ayin Beis, volume 2. Okay. V'akavana b'zeh. We learned this yesterday, but I think it's good to go over again. And the intention in this is, what is the kavanah in this tzimtzum? In what it does regarding there's two elements that it does. It looks like it's referring to both elements. Or it could be a kavanah b'zeh on only the second element. Not positive. Could be both, or it might be the second one primarily. That what? That the oil that will come now afterwards. Remember, there's Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum. That's a divine, indivisible consciousness. This tzimtzum that now has two effects. It conceals the infinite and reveals the finite, and allows it to begin to be able to manifest and become his chalkus of the levels. So he says now the kavanah in this is that the that follows the tzimtzum. So we have three levels here. Before the tzimtzum, and now there's going to be an that's going to follow the tzimtzum. It's going to be called the kav, chazer v'hoyer. It returns, chazer v'hoyer. What means returns? It means it was away for a while. Not obviously in time or space. It means there was a pause. So now, what is the kavanah is that after this pause, the light that comes afterwards, again, conceptually, the light that comes from the artist when he's ready to start painting that one defined art, the flow of now that the teacher is beginning to teach to students, that who ba b'derech dilug hatzimtzum b'hainu shalei ba'adraga. So this light is now a different type of light. It's still divine light that follows, but it's gone through a certain leap. Because the tzimtzum created an inversion. The tzimtzum created a pause. It allowed for a readjustment of consciousness. Whereas pre-tzimtzum it would be only divine consciousness, tzimtzum now allows for another level to emerge, which of course is going to include gvul, that is, the er ha-gvul of godliness, keich ha-gvul and er ha-gvul, and as well as not as well as, the structure that will emerge from that. So that's what it causes. Had you not had the tzimtzum, and you went straight from Ein Sof to Kav, you would not have this leap, and therefore the consciousness would never change. If it didn't change, nothing was gained. All you did was create a kav. But you need to have this complete pause or silence, the father concealing himself from the child, in order to allow an independent consciousness to emerge. In this context, for Er HaGvul and Koyach HaGvul to emerge and begin the process of creation. Because as long as it's under the influence and under the shadow of the infinite light before the tzimtzum, it's a very different type of qualitative way of looking at existence, looking at everything. There is no existence. Because there what dominates is Ein Sof, divine and only the divine. And a divine bli gvul, so there's no room for structure. It's bli gvul. So that's the word dilugat tzimtzum, the leap of the tzimtzum, v'hainu, which means shalei b'hadraga. It's not going in a regular flow. There's been a schism, if you wish. There's been some form of disruption to the regular Ein Sof Lifnei tzimtzum flow. Okay. The inyan hasiluk shenasa adei tzimtzum hu acholol u'mokim pani. This siluk, this removal, or this utter and total concealment that was caused through the tzimtzum, this is the chol l'mokim pani. This is what we mean when we say a cholol, an empty space, a cholol, a hole, and an empty space. What do we mean by that? We mean the effect of the tzimtzum of concealing the that was there before, which means what was dominating was only the habligvul, the tzimtzum is what causes this. This is the chol l'mokum pani. So it's not an actual hole, obviously, and not an actual space. But conceptually, you have concealed a certain level of divine consciousness to allow for gvul, structure of existence to begin to manifest. So now, once you've created this chol l'mokum pani, remember, if there was no pause, there'd be no chol l'mokum pani. The flow, if the flow is going, let's say, like a funnel, from bli gvul, and then you funnel it into gvul, and there's no pause, no empty space, then you're still under the effect of the lifnei tzimtzum dik consciousness. So here, there was a chol l'mokum pani. And b'meila, the air that comes now afterwards, it's not coming direct flow. It's ima yesei, the chazer v'hoyer, even though it's chazer v'hoyer, means it is a return of the light that was there before, avlu b'derech dilug. But no longer is it just a regular flow. It b'derech dilug is with a leap. So the kav, therefore, has two dimensions to it. It follows a complete pause. The teacher fell silent. The artist completely concealed everything. And then it began to radiate, yes, from a light that precedes the tzimtzum, but now with a leap. So basically it's an oyer with dilug put together. Lifnei tzimtzum light, the energy, divine energy, the pre-tzimtzum divine consciousness doesn't have a leap. There everything is flowing seamlessly, shapelessly. It's the tzimtzum that causes a break, and then whatever flows afterwards is now after this break. So think of, let's say, a flowing river, and it's very intense. So you can create, of course, you can create channels that slow down the flow to the point that it comes down to a trickle. That's not what we're talking about here. Imagine now you put up a dam that stops the flow. It literally stops it. But then in the dam you build a channel that after it's paused, now you allow it to start again to flow. That's the difference. Now, of course, a physical doesn't have such a major significant leap. But in the Ruchnis, Lamaila, it's a major difference. Because the first approach, it's a trickle, but it's a trickle that's still under the impression of Lifnei Tzimtzum, so Elikuz B'Pshita still remains a factor. The fact that you paused it, and then you allowed it to flow, that stop, which is called Chol L'Mokum Panim, that's space. In other words, you gave space to the makabel, to the student, to emerge. Then you flow, it's very, very different. Because then the flow is far more commensurate and will relate and leave room for the student. Because if the flow would still be under the impression of the bligvul, it would ultimately overwhelm the student. So this is the key thing to remember. It follows a pause, but it's chazer v'hoyer. It is the water is coming from before the dam. However, the dam has stopped it, at least momentarily. Here, obviously, the tzimtzum is always in effect. So it's not just a momentary thing, it's a constant thing that there's always a pause before the next step. Which makes sense. If you think about it, when Moshe was learning with Hashem, was learning with Moshe. The beginning of Pasha V'yikra, Rashi brings from Medrash. That what? That he made a hefsekim in Pasha LaPasha. When Hashem was teaching, hifsik ben Pasha LaPasha, he would pause and let Moshe absorb it. Now Moshe was a very great mind. Why couldn't Hashem just slow down the process? Why do you have to pause? He could say, you know what, we're going to now review it, we'll speak slowly. No, you have to pause it because he needed Moshe on his own to sit down and integrate it and internalize it. Then we continue. Because if Hashem doesn't stop even for 1 second, then you never, the student, in this case Moshe, like they all say, yes, Moshe was a great student, but Hashem was even a greater teacher. So there had to be a pause. So the student can now say, okay, let me review what I just learned. Even if the teacher were to slow it down, it would not give him enough space. So we need a pause before a break, before we continue. It's like even in a classroom. The teacher stops. At some point says, let's pause now. You can review it, do what you have to do, but I'm going to stop teaching. Doesn't slow down the teaching, he pauses it. So that so-called pregnant pause is the Chol L'Mokum Pani that creates a state of dilug, that what happens next is now no longer completely under the impression of the source. Now the student or the makabel is receiving it on his terms. It's still an oir, but that pause made the big difference, is the key difference to it all. That pause. Okay. So now, we'll start the mashal. I know we stopped here yesterday. I want to apologize for the technical difficulties. I just couldn't get onto Zoom for some reason. We got our tech people trying to look into it. So we decided to do it this way. So now he goes with our mashal. This is from page 941 in Ayin Beis. All this. Like for example, a person who leaps and jumps from one place to another. Leaping and jumping, not walking. What he's going to do now is make a comparison between walking, step by step, and a leap. Remember, he used the word dilug, a leap. So he's going to actually use a physical example, as physical as it gets, to explain the leap of the tzimtzum. So you may never have heard this example before. It's from Ayin Beis, but probably from earlier Maimorim. I believe from the Mittler Rebbe, maybe, even the Alter Rebbe. But I have to look that up. So he says, for example, I'm a dalig v'kev. It says, I'm a dalig ala horim umekapetz ala gvois. So the pasuk uses two expressions, dilug and kfitza. We'll get into the details if necessary later. But bottom line, right now, I'm a dalig v'kev, someone that leaps and jumps. Memokim from one place to another. So you want to go from one place here to here. You can walk or you can jump. Shunetak memokim lemokim shaloi bahadroga klal. He moves from one place to another. Netak means to be uprooted, actually. Netak means removed or uprooted from one place to go to another place completely shaloi bahadroga, not in any progressive procession. In other words, it's not a hadroga. Hadroga would be step by step by step. A leap means you're jumping, not in an orderly fashion. Like it would be when you walk. Tzad achad tzad means step after step. But it's like someone who's flying in the air. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily flying like a bird, but it is the leap. During the time of the leap, you're like flying in the air. You're not walking step by step, as he'll soon explain the difference. So there's walking. That's a gradual progression or process, and there's leaping. So leaping, he says, shalei b'adroga klal, tzad achad tzad, step by step, is structured, meaning step by step. But here's like pereach, like flying in the air. U'kamoy kein hu lamayla. And this mashal is now saying also lamayla, above. Shenim shecha'er derech dilug hatzimtzum. That the light before the tzimtzum does not walk step by step to the light after the tzimtzum. It's not just a regulated flow, but it's in the form of dilug tzimtzum. That the air is nimshach through a leap, the leap of the tzimtzum. Shaloi ba'adroga, not in a structured way, or in a organized structure, step by step way. And through that, the Oyer can now come to a state of distinction and diversity. Because if it was going step by step, the earlier step is bli schalkus, it's bli gvul, there's no distinction. It's the leap that allows for a new state to take, a new paradigm, I should say, a new paradigm to take hold. V'hainu. This means it's not just that the tzimtzum, the concealment magbil, limits the light. Limiting the light would be, as I said, you're channeling it. Remember, we learned earlier that it's not just ribui amiyat. It's not just chokhmah bina. Bina is less light than chokhmah. It's not just quantitative. It's qualitative. The Eir itself comes into distinct levels. How is that possible? When everything was seamless and shapeless. So it's the tzimtzum that allows it, the leap of the tzimtzum that allows this paradigm shift. V'tama dover, and the reason for this is hu lefi shatzimtzum bo b'derech dilug, because the tzimtzum comes in the form of a leap. It's not a diminishment and a channeling, but an actual leap, a pause, like we said earlier. Va'er shebederech dilug, and an air that comes in the form of dilug, of a leap. Hine eifon hamshachasei, its manner of transmission, hu be'eifon acher legamri, is completely different. Mikamay say that hamshachas shebederech gilui, from the way it would come b'derech gilui. He means here b'derech an organized, revealing flow. In other words, this pause and complete concealment, the that comes after a leap, is very different than the original as if would be if the just came in the form of gilui of whatever that was there before, in an organized and step-by-step way. Okay. So the word dilug here is becoming very prominent, the operative word, meaning the idea of a leap. A leap, it means simply a paradigm shift. It's a shift. It's not just a change in a certain level. It's a total shift where a new state can begin to emerge. So we're going to stop here, because what he's going to do next, he's going to explain this according to this moshel. He's going to take this moshel into more detail. And again, a lot of this, most of it, is from Ayin Beis, page 941. Yeah, he's going to come now, this example, the difference between walking and leaping. And that'll help us understand this topic. I wish I could say I could stop and pause for questions, but the way we're doing the technology now is through YouTube, so that will not happen now. If anybody does have questions, you could post it on the group, and I'll try to address it tomorrow. Hopefully tomorrow we can correct the problem. Okay, so we'll stop here, middle of page 86, and everyone have a very good day. 86 of page Tzadik Daled, of Hemshech Tzadik Daled. It's all posted on ayinbeis.com. And we'll resume tomorrow at 9:30. So everyone be well. I always wave to you, so I wave to you. Even though I can't see you, you see me. Be well.